the higher the value, the higher the risk. But the scalability of all this, the way it can permeate so much decision making and have processes accelerated to, shorter lengths than we ever could possibly consider, means that the stuff better be right going in.
Yep.
Got to have those foundations. I'm going to be a broken record, Jan, this whole time, but somebody has to be, screaming and yelling and telling and selling about this. I call myself the data whisperer, but spoiler alert, I don't do a whole lot of whispering. We've got to be out there just really trumpeting the concept that no matter what you do in technology, you have to have these basic things in place.
Welcome to Augmented You. My name is Jan, and this is my conversation with Scott Taylor, also known as the Data Whisperer. I met Scott at a data conference last summer in Boston. Scott is a leading voice in data management, a highly sought-after keynote speaker, and recognized by Data IQ, CDO Magazine, and Dataversity, among others, as one of the most influential and engaging figures in the industry. Scott champions data storytelling for data management, emphasizing the strategic why over technical details. In this episode, we discuss the critical connection between data and AI and why data leaders play an essential role in shaping the future of enterprise AI. Enjoy. Scott, everyone's talking about AI. It's all the rage right now, but perhaps not enough people are talking about data. Some are talking about the importance of data quality, or let's say high quality data for high quality AI, garbage in, garbage out concept. But how do you see this link? What's the link between AI and data? What do you see in your conversations and you personally?
It's inextricable. You can't unlick it. And the fact that people are talking about AI and not talking about data, it's like they're talking about, we want to have a great meal, but they're not discussing the food and the ingredients. And there's this missing link for sure in people's minds around everything we do in technology requires data. And if you want to do anything at scale, that data better be great. Better be strong, better be standardized, better be well-governed, better be expertly stewarded. Otherwise, anything else you want to do is not going to work.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And are you seeing with these new AI solutions that are coming out now, more generative AI focused solution? And you've been in the data management space for decades, right?
Since pre-2K. So
Pre-2K,
yes.
Yeah, so you've seen it all essentially. You've seen it all in this space. Are you seeing this kind of new technology, latest AI technology, introduce some new requirements for data management? Do we need to kind of change our approaches in how we manage data, specifically in the context of, let's say, generative AI?
Without getting too technically specific, I think we have to augment the fact that this data needs to be well managed and reinforce that even more emphatically. Because with AI, things can go wild and go to scale in ways that we never imagined before. And so garbage in, garbage everywhere is what happens. And it can get way out of control. But the fundamentals are still the fundamentals. That's why they call them that. And I'm a broken record for the last 30 years here in terms of garbage in, garbage out, in terms of building the foundation, standardizing your requirements, having common definitions across your enterprise, doing all that hard work so you can do the fun, sexy, hot stuff later. And so for me, the fact that AI is so exposed to so many users in ways that data-oriented things hadn't been, it just brings an opportunity for the folks in the data management space to really step up and say, now we really have to do it. Not that we haven't done that in every new way of development over the last 30 years, but the critical nature of the value that AI can bring to an organization should be reflected in the critical nature that data governance should bring to an organization.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think the way you put it is absolutely correct, right? Data management was never that cool kid on the block, right? Everyone's talking about AI solutions, but when it comes to data quality or data cleanup, no one's excited about that, right?
Never. No, it's kind of, and when you think about it, it's where data starts. That's the space I've lived in, where data starts versus where data ends up. You don't need a quote from, Yogi Berra or Yoda to say about if you don't start the right way, you're not going to end up where you want to go. but it's always been there. It's an undeniable fact. You know, you talk about GIGO, we learned that on the first day of data, but for me,
Yeah.
it's as sure as gravity, right? What goes up must come down, what goes in must come out, and there's nothing that's going to change that. And I feel fairly, confident and strong in the space, especially in the technology space where things change so much. And people are
Yeah.
always talking about completely disrupting the paradigm, when you just go, look, there are basic laws of, call it physics or computer science or whatever you want to call it, that you cannot be refuted.
Yeah. Yeah. What about risks? If I got that, or your thinking is, as AI is kind of becoming omnipresent, right? And you have these solutions which are now in domains or spaces where AI was previously not really used. You think that that kind of elevates the risk, right? If we don't take care of that upstream data that is fueling these models downstream, the risk is that much greater, because now these applications are exposed to customers, employees, in domains where people are not necessarily trained on how to use this technology well. That kind of elevates the risk, right?
Undeniably, it
Yeah.
is. The higher the value, the higher the risk. But the scalability of all this, the way it can permeate so much decision making and have processes accelerated to, you know shorter lengths than we ever could possibly consider, means that the stuff better be right going in.
Yeah.
Got to have those foundations. I'm going to be a broken record, Jan, this whole time, but somebody has to be, screaming and yelling and telling and selling about this. I call myself the data whisperer, but spoiler alert, I don't do a whole lot of whispering. We've got to be out there just really trumpeting the concept that no matter what you do in technology, you have to have these basic things in place.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. What about if we kind of flip the coin? So we mentioned that AI is introducing these new requirements. Risks have never been greater, right, for making mistakes with the data. But can AI actually help us solve some of those issues? Can AI come in, within data management and solve some of those issues upstream, so that, in a way, it can help itself do a better job when it needs to answer questions, make decisions, and things
I
like that?
certainly hope so, because a lot of the data stewardship tasks and just the grunt work of clerically cleaning and standardizing data is mind numbing for a
Yeah.
lot of people. And you would think that AI could do something as simple as making sure, street and avenue are spelled the same way. I mean, really basic
Yeah.
clerical stuff.
Yeah.
And it could end up being, a lot of that was hard work. And I always talked about, I used exercise and eating right as an analogy
Yeah.
for data governance forever, because people say you want to be healthy, you got to exercise, you got to eat right. Now, maybe AI is the Ozempic for data governance
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
ways, where it can clean some things up in a much faster way than we thought possible.
Yeah, awesome. I like that. I like that analogy. All right, let's go. Let's kind of keep exploring that and go to these, let's say, data management themes that you're seeing in these past years with AI. Is there something that you see consistently being misunderstood or underappreciated within data management? Again, when it comes to AI solutions or AI driven conversations.
It's nothing new. It's just the scale of it. So at the risk of
Yeah.
continuing to repeat myself, the value of every type of agentic AI project, or every digitally transformative customer facing initiative, or anything you do in e-commerce, or any kind of enterprise um, platform that's implemented, all those basic things, they are all completely and inextricably linked to the value and the output of your data management efforts. So it
Yep.
continues to be that theme. What we hope is people realize at the conceptual level, at the business level, that you just don't get to order to the dessert. You got to have you got to eat your vegetables too. You've
Yeah.
got to have the organization committed in some way, shape, or form to the data governance and data management part. And you can't borrow from one to pay for the other, because you're going to get in all kinds of trouble. So the opportunity again presents itself for data leaders, especially those concerned about the data management side, to get into those discussions, to get into those rooms, to be the broken record and go, this stuff sounds great. However, here's a list of our top 10 customer categories, and number 2 is other. because we don't have a standard categorization and taxonomy for our basic customer activity, or we don't have a standard hierarchical structure for our top customers, or when somebody says how many suppliers do we have, we still say, well, it depends. Those kinds of things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Those are what plague the data management and certainly the enterprise data governance world, is dealing with those same common questions.
Yeah. What about, we hear it from a lot of companies. We're data driven. We're AI driven. We're at the forefront of this, right? We have it all handled. Are there any red flags that you see, when you hear companies say that? Is that actually what's happening in the background?
I mean, I'm like a bull when I hear that stuff in terms of seeing red flags and red capes flying around, because it's just, and a lot of it is just hype and just
Yeah.
sort of self-congratulatory, pumping yourself up. You think about it. I mean, right? Everybody's an AI company now. A
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
decks and presentations start with that. Before that, it was everybody's a software company. Before that, it was
Yeah.
everybody's a data company. If you go to your business leaders and you say, we're an AI company, they're going to look at you like you've got 5 heads. It's like, no, we build widgets and we deliver these widgets, whatever that happens to be. And the problem I have with that logic is, if the tools you used made you the kind of company you are, then face it, every company's a paperclip company. And we don't hear anybody bragging about that. So stay focused on your business. And when you go too far on trying to label yourself as a kind of thing that you're not, you're going to lose stakeholder support. You're going to lose executive sponsorship, and you're not going to get the funding you want to be, and I say this deliberately, AI driven.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned this executive sponsorship, right? If someone is a data leader, right, and they were to ask you, "Hey Scott, help me out. How can I get people on board?" Again, we said it, data management is not really cool. It's not fancy. It's not that sexy thing everyone wants to do. How do you help those people? How should they phrase their initiatives? What should they focus on?
They focus on the why first. They focus on why, not how. So as data
Yep.
people, we love to talk about how we get stuff done. And we love to say we tried this and then we tried that and then we did this. So imagine being in a board meeting in front of all your executives and explaining, telling, you need to tell a story, but don't
Yeah.
tell your life story. Don't go through every single step. And here's our data model and here's this. And talk about why what you're trying to do with data will enable the strategic intentions of your enterprise.
Yeah.
Where is your company going? And why is this data initiative going to help you get there? And so it's incumbent on you as a data leader to put a story together that is business focused and shows how ways you're going to move the business forward, not ways you're going to make data better or ways you're going to create this new model. Those are the how. And I never
Yeah.
met a CEO or a CFO who cares about how you're going to do stuff until they understand why it's important to the business. So putting that story together is really the core of my work, helping people do what I call data storytelling for data management,
Yeah.
aligning those initiatives that you've got and those projects you've got in the data space to the things your business is trying to accomplish. And as a leader, you must be fluent in those kinds of things. And to get some data leaders a little more nervous that maybe they're not getting the support they need, I will tell you right up front, data people are up against much better storytellers in their organization. If you're in marketing, you know how to tell a story and you're going for funding. If you're in sales, you can't tell a story, you don't make quota. So those people are trained in the soft skills that a lot of data people lack. It's not our fault. The data space is built on hard skills, built on science,
Yep.
built on the hard skills. And it's a little ironic that soft skills are harder to learn sometimes. But being a leader is being well-rounded in a lot of different kinds of capabilities. And one of them, way at the top of the list, is the ability to tell a story.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. So focus on the why, focus on that outcome as opposed to, hey, we did all these cool stuff. We are bringing in these all new cool models, but focus on, okay, what will that actually help the business do and achieve?
What are the business benefits? What is the business story? Not what's the data story, not what are the data benefits. Yeah, focus on the business. Speak the language of your business. Understand your business. And the beauty of being in data and AI or any part of that world is that we can offer benefits to every other part of the business.
Yeah.
Pick another department that can do that.
Yeah.
You know, we help across sales, across marketing, across operations, finance, legal, executive. I like to talk about how it across all those verticals, it's
Yeah.
horizontal value that you can bring for the entire enterprise.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. we were we were pretty critical, right, of where, let's say, the state of the domain or state of data within AI. But are you seeing things getting better in terms of, are people, executives actually listening, or they're prepared to open those conversations about data, or not
I,
really?
I hope so. I'm not in too many of them because I'm helping people help themselves in
Yeah.
those. But I've always figured, even without going too deep into an organization, anybody who's successful in implementing these tools and approaches must have those data governance things in place.
Yeah.
Meaning not they have to have, but they already have. You
Yeah.
look at the big disruptors out there and the big platforms that we all lean on every day, Uber, Airbnb, Netflix. All these companies have very well standardized, finely tuned data that fuels all those activities with unique identifiers and hierarchies and taxonomies and geographies, the basic
Yeah.
stuff. Otherwise, their systems wouldn't work. And it's that
Yeah.
unsung hero infrastructure behind the scenes that help support that entire image of these seamless experiences that we all know and love and begin to count on.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Now, looking forward, looking ahead, we see, these new, more and more powerful tools, AI enabled tools. We see automations becoming more and more powerful. We see AI agents solving tasks or complex problems which before only humans could solve. Do you see this have an impact on data management, data governance roles? Do you think some of that will be automated by AI, or potentially fully automated, or is that hype? Are you not seeing it yet?
There's always hype everywhere, so there's no question in the data space you can never get away from the hype, but you hope that it does.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
tasks, again, very boring, very clerical, very, seem
Yeah.
to be not as value added as the cool, fun, sexy stuff. But it doesn't make data governance go away. There's
Yeah.
always that step. Just because you went to a restaurant doesn't mean that somebody, and you didn't have to do the chopping of the onions yourself. Does
Yeah.
that mean that nobody chopped onions? No, the onions were chopped. The sous
Yeah.
chef was
Yeah. Yeah.
back there preparing those things. Does it become faster? Does it become more automated? Does it become easier? That is the hope. That is the desire. That's the goal. But does it go away? No, because it's a natural process of taking unstructured, disparate data from multiple sources and trying to integrate it and align it and aggregate it in ways that bring value to an organization. Unless all data across all domains and all sources get standardized, which will never happen,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you're still going to need some form of data governance. You're still going to
Yeah.
need it.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing to a little bit switch the topic. One thing we're big on this channel, Augmented You, is helping people kind of stay above all the noise, right? And really, share information that will help them stay on top of everything, prepare themselves, whether, in their personal lives or at the workspace. How do you stay on top of everything? Because you mentioned there's a lot of noise out there, a lot of information. How do you kind of navigate that?
I've got a couple of sources, sort of one that is more personal and then one that are more general. But the general ones, I'm always listening for the story. So when I go to conferences and when I watch webinars from technology brands and so on, I'm always most interested in the first 5 minutes. How do they
Yeah.
set this up? How do they bring us into the world that they are describing? Just what is the exposition, which is technically what you would call that in the storytelling format, that they share? That for me, because that sets the whole context for somebody. And again, in the data space, we're not as good at that structured storytelling, but that's, what are the things they're talking about? One, are they continually reinforcing the things that I believe in? And it's always in there. At some point, somebody will say, well, we had all these disparate data sources. We have silos. We have, it's like, as soon as they say silos, you can take a shot. It's like, all right,
Yeah.
you're waiting for those words. Another thing, I've always been really good, obviously, at the story part. I can
Yeah.
explain things really well. I am not technical at all. I never look under the hood, and I have no acumen to determine whether something, for me, everything demos beautifully, right? You're looking at, oh, that looks fine. And I don't go behind that and say, okay, how does that really work? But I have, and I've always partnered with people, whether I was at an organization or even on my own, who really do that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
one person I'll bring up, Sanjeev Mohan, if you know him, he was a Gartner analyst, and he does an
Yeah.
exquisite job explaining what's really going on behind the scenes
Yeah.
in a very accessible fashion. And he's someone who I will reach out to and say, I'm thinking about this idea. Do I have it right? Because I want to make a joke on it, or I want to kind of link the
Yeah.
data governance story part of it, but I've got to get that right. And even when I was working at real jobs, I mean, today I'm just a full-time content creator. I always
Yeah.
partnered with somebody technically to say, look, I
Yeah.
put this story together. I know it sounds good, but is it accurate? And I want to be accurate. So if you tell me I'm wrong, it's okay. I'll make the right answer sound good too. That's what I can do.
Yeah.
And that's critically important. You know, in storytelling, especially in business storytelling, you want to have kind of a Venn diagram of, okay, I'm sounding cool on one side, but I'm technically accurate. And you want to be in that overlap,
Yeah.
because the people who really do know what's going on, if you're not accurate in their eyes, it invalidates any talent you might have in putting a narrative together. So it's
Yeah.
critical. You don't want to over rotate on one side or the other. And again, you can
Yeah.
balance that between the why and the how. There's a lot of different bifurcations I use around that. But
Yeah.
for me, it's always, you know, when data observability was an example, I did
Yeah.
a piece on it, but I wanted to really understand, because a lot of the hype made it sound like it was something that it's not quite. And I went to Sanjeev. I went, all right, do I have this right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. No, you don't have this one, but yeah, this one, and that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
again, sort
Yeah.
of open in the market, what's out there and people are promoting, and then some of these inside folks I can always reach out to because they're such great friends of mine and there's such great
Yeah.
expertise to say, all right, is this real or not?
Yeah, awesome. So the way I kind of understood it, you're focusing on amplifying the things that you are good at, that you're focused on, but then in areas that are not your focus, you kind of you go to those trusted sources and say, did I get that right? And then
Yeah.
you really trust the people.
Like I'm not good at trends. Like I don't know what's
Yeah,
coming next, but
yeah,
I am good at, okay, whatever the latest
yeah,
trend is, finding the connection between that trend and the core things I talk about, which are data management, data stewardship, data
yeah.
governance.
Yeah. Awesome. Scott, phenomenal. And you shared a lot of great things. Is there anything you kind of wish stayed with our audience? So we mentioned the importance of data. You mentioned the importance of data storytelling, right? How, organizations need to start listening. You need to get the data piece right. You need to get that foundational piece in place. You mentioned how you kind of stay on top of it. Is there anything else you would want to share, or perhaps kind of summarize all of those?
My single piece of advice, and I'm often asked this at conferences, students or data science, newbies come up to me, or even seasoned CDOs, what should I, and I always say the same thing: learn how to tell a story.
Yeah.
You already know how to tell a story. If you did something this weekend and you wanted to tell your wife or your parents about it, you would explain it in a story. You wouldn't go right to the punchline, or you wouldn't
Yeah.
pull out some random fact. You would tell a story, but realize that you want to nurture that. You want to get better at that. However you do that. And that's my talent. That's what I've always leaned on. I tell people I have a fear of not public speaking. So I'm
Yeah.
up there on stage and I love it. But as data professionals, go take Toastmaster classes, try things in the mirror, rehearse, get better at the technique of telling stories, and you will be able to convey your ideas in ways that will transform people. A good story can get somebody in a business in any sense, but we're talking about business here. It can get somebody to go from, I have no idea what you're talking about, to how do we live without this? And that's what you want. You want people to be enthusiastic and realize the value of what you have to offer. And the primary way to communicate that is through a business accessible narrative, which is just a fancy way to talk about a story.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Where can we read more about it?
Well, good question there. So you're happy. I put all this together in my book. It's been out for a couple of years, called Telling Your Data Story, Data Storytelling for Data Management. It's 99% buzzword free. You can see right on there. I didn't want to
Yeah.
overpromise. But in
Yeah.
there, it's a fairly quick read because it's about storytelling, so it can't be too long. But it covers a lot of things
Yeah.
I've talked about. I've got some simple frameworks to help people organize the way they think about it. and it's been really popular. A lot of people seem to love the book, and it's still selling well for my publisher, even though it's a couple years old. For me, somebody asked me, "Would you update the book?" I said the only thing I would do is put agentic AI every third paragraph. Otherwise, it's the same. It's the same story. But it's on Amazon. It's in my publisher, Technics Publications. But hopefully, some folks will find that valuable.
Yeah, awesome. Because it's not an easy thing, right? Telling a good story, right? And having some of that, some of that information or a framework for how to even approach it. I think that's super helpful. Awesome, Scott. Thanks so much for being our guest tonight. I think the thoughts you shared were awesome. I think it's going to help our audience just understand the space better. What is going on? What should they really focus on? What are perhaps those things that we don't focus enough on? And data is definitely one of those things. And then data storytelling, as you say, is that kind of skill that is missing for a lot of data leaders out there.
Oh, you're welcome, Don. Thanks for having me. It was a blast.
Thank you so much. Good luck.